Hello everyone and welcome back to another video where today we're going to be talking about Europe's secret weapon against the US in the ever-escalating trade war between the two. But before we get into that, I wanted to address a comment that you guys have been sharing, mainly that the background's kind of distracting because it's Doctor Who themed, because my main channel is Doctor Who focused, and I hear you. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do much about it in the short term. However, after the construction work that is taking place over the next couple of months in the house, I will be able to then have a proper sort out, and I'm hoping you will have a new background for these videos by then. So if you could just bear with it for the time being, I know it's distracting. I know some of you did suggest putting a green screen up in the background, but to be honest, there just isn't enough space for it. But I will be changing it as soon as I can. But with that said, feel free to subscribe if you're new. We're about to hit 500 subscribers, which I'm very, very grateful for. The support on this channel has been absolutely fantastic, and yeah, I'm just really appreciative for all of you making this jump with me. But let's dive right into it. So what do I mean by Europe's secret weapon against the US? Well, Donald Trump thinks about the world very much in terms of deals and business and commerce, and particularly about who holds the most cards in any given conflict. He was at pains to reiterate this, if you recall, in that terrible White House press conference with Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, where he basically said that Ukraine held none of the cards and they need to basically just accept whatever terms they are given at this stage. And America has basically acted like it has all the cards in this conflict. Like they can just annex Greenland without Europe really being able to do anything. And while it is true that much of the military infrastructure of Europe and the UK is tied up in America, and I did a whole video talking about why that's probably why Starmer is not getting too involved where other European allies are, it doesn't mean that Europe is completely cardless in this conflict. And over the night, we started to see one of the major weapons they could wield against the US. Mainly US treasuries, as Danish pension fund Akademir Pension announces they will sell all US treasuries by month end, citing rising credit risk under President Trump. The fund's CIO says US finances are no longer sustainable due to weak fiscal discipline, a softer dollar, and Trump's push for Greenland. Now, it's important to state that this pension fund only holds about 100 million US dollars in US treasuries, which isn't a lot, but it's a start. But the big thing here is what this could lead to. Because if you look at who owns US debt, you can see here that Japan owns just under 1.1 trillion, China owns 768 billion, and then just below them is myself and my country, the good old UK, with 765 billion in US debt. And obviously you've got a bunch of the other European allies, Belgium, Switzerland, France, etc., etc., etc. Ireland as well. So basically, if Europe comes together and starts mass dumping US treasuries, it could cause significant damage to the US economy, significantly weakening the dollar, driving up mortgage rates, and effectively causing significant pain to the US economy. Now, we've actually seen a phenomenon similar to this back when Liz Truss was in power over here in the UK, where because of unfunded tax cuts, the international market started mass selling off UK bonds, leading to the pound's lowest point against the dollar in recent memory, where $1 was worth about £1.08 compared to now, where it's looking to be about £1.34. So essentially, Europe could combine to do this same thing, but on a much, much wider scale. And according to Bloomberg, Europe may begin selling its US assets in response to new conflict with the US, a move that can trigger dollar collapse. This is a big weapon that Europe can wield, along with its allies, against the US. Europe holds a ton of US debt, and if it starts mass selling it off, it could cause economic havoc for the US. And in fact, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary of the United States, recently shrugged off the bond market meltdown, saying Denmark is irrelevant. They're all just so nice, aren't they? They're so nice when it comes to their allies. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent played down a slump in US government bonds, blaming the sell-off on a surge in Japanese yields rather than the so-called Sell America trade. That is true. people are selling off Japanese yields as well, but there is definitely a move to sell America. In fact, it even has a name. At the World Economic Forum in Davos on Wednesday, Bessent shrugged off a question about European institutional investors ditching US assets. Danish pension fund, Akademika Pension, I feel like I'm always saying that wrong, but said on Tuesday that it would exit its 100 million portfolio of treasuries by the end of the month, citing its concerns about government finances. Denmark's investment in US Treasury bonds, like Denmark itself, is irrelevant. They're so diplomatic and friendly, aren't they? Our beloved ally. Bessent said at a press conference, it's less than 100 million they've been selling treasuries there for years. I'm not concerned at all. But if you look at the 10-year Treasury yield for the US, it's spiked massively. We can get an even better look at this if we look at the US 30-year yield. Look at that spike. And it would only get worse if Europe started selling off its treasury bonds in the US. Additionally to all of that, last night, over 1.3 trillion was wiped out from the US stock market today as a result of all the market instability, in large part likely down to the EU eyeing up 93 billion in retaliatory tariffs, as well as them recently announcing their exit from the EU-US trade deal that was recently signed. And this would only get worse if this continued, which it likely would. As far as I understand it about stocks, people always say to buy the dip, but I think the dip is going to go a lot lower before it goes higher. Apparently as well, the US dollar index is down 10% since Donald Trump came into office as well. So while Europe can't exactly wage a traditional war on the US and doesn't want to, it can inflict a lot of damage on the US if it wants to by selling off its treasury bonds, cancelling trade deals, making their stock market crash further. Now, this would have wider consequences upon the world economy as well, but it would be much more concentrated on the US specifically than something like 2008 was, where that was felt a lot more worldwide. This would be a case of every other country targeting America specifically. And as I said, this would cause a collapse in the dollar, causing raises in prices, raises in mortgage rates, which would give Trump an even harder time back home and make it even more difficult for him to wage a war on Greenland potentially in the future. So Europe is not powerless. It's not going to be an easy task as the US becomes increasingly hostile against Europe and its allies. But we do hold some of the cards. And if you want my opinion, I think we should all start selling US bonds as much as possible. Europe should start selling them, the UK should start selling them, Japan start selling them. Everyone who's got a high amount of US Treasury bonds, start selling them. Like, it's time to send a message. That's what I would say to our governments who hold all these Treasury bonds. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you soon.